Melinda, Nathan, Tanya, thanks so much for joining, guys. Christopher, wonderful to have you here. Just going to wait a few more minutes, guys. Just let a few more people join. Jenny, thanks so much for coming along today. It's fantastic. Especially on a Wednesday afternoon. Do appreciate everyone making the time to come along today. It's just ticked over to 4 o'clock. We'll just let a few more stragglers come on in before we get cracking. And thanks again for making the time today, Isaac, coming along. We really do appreciate it. The 80% probability of being here was had me a little bit nervous, but alrighty. Fantastic. We are recording. Got our presentation up. We've got our guests here. I think we're ready to roll. Thanks so much for coming along today, guys. My name is Alex. I work for Interstate Recruitment. I actually work out of our Sydney campuses for the University of Tasmania. We're here today to talk about the Australian Maritime College webinar today, of course, about careers in maritime and submarines. Submarines was actually one of the other things that we wanted to talk to you today. I'm joined today, very fortunate, by one of our ocean engineering students, Curtis Graham. I'll give everyone a wave there, Curtis. And one of our engineers, Isaac, who's also joined us to have a chat. And Alicia Perry, who's come from the Australian Maritime College. She's going to help me answer any questions at the end of this. Just to give everyone an idea of what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to start off by giving those who are not so familiar with the AMC with a brief overview of what the AMC does, what its role is, and its main areas of strength, the main study areas that it contributes to. I'm then going to turn the spotlight over to our guests. I'm going to have a chat with Isaac about what it's like to be an engineer with autonomous underwater vehicles. He actually works with vessels like submarines. And then I'll have a chat with Curtis, talk about what it's like to actually be an ocean engineering student at the AMC, what he wants to do in the future, how he's found the experience from a student's perspective. And then we're going to flip it over to you guys. Down the bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A speech bubble there. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type questions down there. And at the end, we'll take some time to answer all of those questions. If you do ask a question that we're for some reason not able to answer live on the webinar, we'll let you know, first of all. And all of these questions are recorded. We'll get back to you in the coming days with an answer from someone from the AMC. So please don't hesitate when you're asking those questions. We're here to make sure you're not walking away wondering about anything. And just as a public service announcement for anyone wondering, we will be recording this webinar as well. So you get a copy of the recording if you wanted to go back, watch anything that particularly interested you about today's presentation. And just as a final FYI before I keep going, we're also going to be attending the Adelaide Careers Expo, obviously in the virtual sense, but we are going to be at the Adelaide Careers Expo from tomorrow. So if you had any follow-up questions, wanted to have a chat about applications, anything like that with us, please come and say hi to us there. So I'm just going to start off, give everyone an overview of the AMC, give you an idea of where we're coming from and where our guests today are coming from as well. So it stands for the Australian Maritime College. We call ourselves Australia's National Institute for Maritime Education, Training and Research. And we're a pretty unique educational institute. We're the only maritime college in Australia, and we're a specialty institute. As a result, we're offering niche courses to people where you can't really find the same suite of courses that we offer in maritime studies anywhere else. And as a result, our graduates tend to be a little bit more in demand, a little bit more connected. Because we have that distinction of being a maritime college, we have these extraordinary industry connections that you just can't really find at other universities because they obviously branch out a little bit more in that sense. So we're niche, our graduates are in demand, and our graduates are also connected very closely to industry. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Specialist Institute at the AMC actually studies and what our main study themes are. So the first kind of umbrella in terms of study areas that we offer is maritime engineering. So this is basically engineering vessels on and off the water. And we cover all the different areas and industries that you can actually conduct maritime engineering in. And it falls under three umbrellas. So the first umbrella under maritime engineering is naval architecture. And this is actually the design of ships and underwater vehicles, actually creating the skeletons. Whenever you see a ship in a ship dock being built, the outline of that ship, the design of that ship has been designed by a naval architect. We're actually the only institute in Australia that offers naval architecture as a degree available to students. A second one, ocean engineering, of which Curtis is a current student, Isaac is an alumni of, is anything that's kind of built on top of the water is the way that the AMC likes to talk about it. So this could be anything from renewable energy, building wind farms out in the middle of the ocean, coastal structures, things like oil rigs, or sustainable harbour design. So building any structures that come offshore within a harbour. And then finally, we've got marine and offshore engineering. So this is actually building the guts of the ship. If you're interested in kind of building engines of ships, that kind of thing, you would do marine and offshore engineering. That's kind of building the actual engines that drive the vessels on top of the water. So the second main area that the AMC teaches in is global logistics and maritime management. And I like to think of this as a little bit like a business degree that's maritime focused. I think one of the things that's probably a little bit invisible when we look at the world's economy is how predominant or how ubiquitous shipping is when it comes to the world economy. 90% of the world's trade, actually, 90% of all the world's trade is conducted through shipping. So this is a big industry. It's a big industry that's not going anywhere. And the people who actually graduate in this area get to work in this extraordinary network of trade. So if you're looking to kind of go into business, this is a really great way to get into that area with a bit of a twist. And we do have students who can go on and do an MBA. We do offer an MBA in global logistics and maritime management as well. And the final category is ocean and coastal seafaring. And this is if you actually want to be operating ships. So one of the degrees that we offer, for example, is nautical science. This is if you want to be working to be an officer on a major commercial vessel, going around the world for months at a time. You can do that by doing something like ocean seafaring or nautical science. Similarly, if you wanted to operate a smaller vessel, we also do maritime operations and coastal seafaring. So this is if you're, for example, operating smaller fishing vessels, tourism, slightly smaller vessels that just go off the coast. You can also get those degrees with the AMC. So we kind of, as you can see, we kind of offer areas that are slightly more academic, more industry focused, and we also offer things a little bit more on the vet side with coastal seafaring as well. So that concludes my brief overview of what the AMC actually does. Hopefully it gives you a good idea of what we do as a niche institute at the AMC. And I'm going to turn the spotlight over to our guests today. And first of all, I'm going to talk to Isaac a little bit about his job. Isaac's an autonomous underwater vehicle engineer. Is that the right title for you, Isaac?
Definitely is. Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. So I just to kind of get things started, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you got into ocean engineering in the first place. Like we talked about before, this can sometimes be seen as a bit of a niche option. But was there something in your background? Did you like tinkering with machines before you studied at the AMC? How did you kind of settle on doing ocean engineering as your undergraduate?
Look, I grew up by the sea, a small coastal town in northern New South Wales, and I did a lot of diving, lot of surfing, that sort of stuff, but always had a knack for, I grew up on a building site, so I always sort of like to see how things all fit together and work. I as advisor once sort of suggested it to me, and as opposed to going down the civil engineering track, which a lot of my mates did, I decided to jump on a plane and come check Tassie out, and next thing I knew, I was down here.
Wow, oh, it's kind of blink and you're still in Tassie at the moment, aren't you, Isaac?
Yes, yes. So I came down in 2011 now. So the last 10th year down here.
Wow, congratulations, I suppose.
Uh,
So we've probably got a few people in the audience today who are thinking about doing something. They know that they kind of like being in the ocean, like you did when you were a bit younger. They know that they like building things. How would you describe what you do to someone who may not know anything about engineering per se, but kind of likes the same things that you liked when you were at school?
yeah, right. I guess I represent quite a a very interesting sort of element of the ocean engineering sort of field, or just in maritime engineering as a whole. I guess it really depends on the size of the company or institute that you end up working at, as to the scope of work you do. But look, for me, it's everything from sort of fixing issues with hydraulic systems to designing launch and recovery systems to for an AUV,
Mhm.
to operating small craft or fixing electrical issues. Well, literally, the scope of my work covers everything from hydraulics engineering to electrical to
Right. So
it's ridiculous.
because usually when we're talking to prospective students who want to go into engineering, they've kind of got this idea that they want to go into electrical or civil. But you're saying that when you did this degree, you're kind of covering all these different facets of engineering.
Well, yeah, it's quite interesting. You
Hmm.
do in that sense, but you just end up sort of getting the building blocks to maybe approach thinking or a
Hmm.
problem. You get taught the elements of electronics or
Sure.
electrical engineering, but you're provided the skill set to know how to properly look into it if you do have a problem in that field. Um,
Hmm.
it's an interesting one because now I'll sort of happily go and pull an engine apart, just because I'm thinking about it like an engineer, more so than anything. I'm not an engine specialist by any means, but it's all logical once you start looking at it from this perspective.
Yeah, right. It's quite an I suppose, a slightly different perspective on engineering that you might get from other degrees.
Oh,
Sorry, Isaac, we
completely.
just had a question from Stefan. I'll just pop in here and say, Stefan's asked if this will be this webinar made available at a later date. Absolutely, we're recording it. We'll send it out to everyone who's here today. Stefan, just want to let you know. Now, Isaac, when we were talking before about UAVs, could you just tell us a little bit about what UAVs actually are?
Yep. So I've got conveniently got a model right here
Super
of
convenient.
the autonomous underwater vehicle that I work with every other day. So it's a 8 meter long submarine. It's a shaped vehicle. They come in all shapes, sizes, colors, etc. But it's essentially a robotic submarine. There's no one inside of it, and there's no one directly controlling it. So it's full of computers, batteries, and scientific equipment. And
Amazing.
us as engineers will maintain it and get it to the water, and it will carry out what we've planned for it. It will
Okay.
do a survey of something and collect some measurements, and then hopefully come back at the end of the day and provide all that data to us on a thumb drive sort of thing.
On a thumb drive.
Wow, that sort of thing, yeah.
Amazing.
Some of them have hot swappable hard drives, so it comes to the surface and you yank the hard drive out. So,
Oh wow.
yeah.
So who when you guys are building UAVs, who do you collaborate when you're making these types of vehicles, and what are they generally? What kind of information are they usually collecting?
Look, it's quite funny because it's quite a sort of niche field in itself.
Mm,
Maritime industry as a whole, it's you end up getting to know the community very quickly across the world. There's a handful of people that you end up talking to on a semi-regular basis and run into.
sure.
So, I mean, we regularly talk to people in the UK, people in the US, Canada, um, Yeah, like in France as well. It's a very small community, really. Once you sort of boil down, sort of who does research
Mm.
in this field. Uh,
Yeah, this is definitely something that that I've found too when I've talked to people in the maritime industry. It's one of the few industries where everyone I talk to seems to have worked with someone from a different country.
yes, 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 completely. It's you find there's still experts in this field, and it's like, oh,
Mm.
you want to talk to in that sort of these guys. These guys have done that already, and it's hilarious. Yeah, it's like you've got global friends.
Easy to network. That's good news
Yes,
for our
oh,
future students.
oh, for sure, for sure. And what was the other element of your question? Sorry.
So what kind of information are the UAVs
Yep.
collecting generally?
Well, look, it really comes down to who you're collaborating with. A lot of the time, we work very closely with some scientists or clients, for that matter, and you're usually requesting a certain product. They may come along with an instrument, or may use one of ours, depending on the application. But it can be anything from maybe mapping the seafloor to see where the sandbars are in a coastal environment, to
Wow.
surveying the temperatures of the water under Antarctic ice sheets, or surveying with a camera scallop beds or something like that, or a oil and gas pipeline placement. So it really
Okay.
depends on the application. It's another tool to provide access for instruments that you would otherwise put on a ship potentially, or
Sure.
or something like that. So it's just a means to get these instruments to hard to reach places, or to remove the human operator out of the loop.
Sure, sure. So it sounds like you're collaborating a lot of the time with commercial interests, with academic interests, public interests,
And
wide variety
defense,
of uses, and
yeah, and
defense,
defense, yeah, and
of
defense,
course.
yeah.
Interesting,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, so that's
Um,
a
we actually just got a question. I just want to just repeat to everyone in the audience, please use the Q&A function down the bottom. Just got a question that's specifically for you, Isaac. So I might just ask it for you right now on camera before we keep
yep.
going. One of our attendees has asked, Isaac, what was your qualification or academic pathway after school for going into the AUV engineering role? So I guess just being a little bit explicit about the degrees that you did, and if you did
Yep.
any post-grad study as well afterwards.
Yeah, yep, for sure.
Thanks for the question.
So I went through the ocean engineering program, as with a lot of my colleagues. On as a bit of a side note, maybe halfway through that degree, myself and a couple of friends uh, kicked off a autonomous technology society. So we sort of did a little bit of that on the side, because a lot of the degree at that point in time wasn't very focused on autonomy. There was elements of it, but we sort of kicked off this society and sort of played with making hydrofoiling boats remote control and semi-autonomous in our free time. I then managed to get, in the final year of your degree, you do a sort of a research project with a supervisor. It just so happens I managed to get in with a lecturer professor at the time that had access to an underwater vehicle, and carried out some studies with him. And that sort of just gave me a leg up into applying directly into the position I'm currently in, as a, or I technically currently started as an AUV technician, and then over the past 5.5 years have worked my way up from that role. Sort of doing a lot of professional development, a lot of courses, training, sort of going overseas and working with other sort of institutes and companies, and yeah, just building a lot of that through what I do day to day. And that's quite applicable with a lot of the roles you go into. You don't
Mm.
know what you're doing. You're just given the building blocks to start the job. No one's expecting you to know exactly how to design this or that. It's just giving you the skill set to start learning once you get into that job, really.
Sure. I think that there was there was a really good bit of advice in there as well for any prospective students who might be listening, is that you actually created a society that was about autonomous vehicles to begin with, and that kind of helped you gain a little bit of traction maybe with some of the staff and helped you make some connections. This actually ties into one of the questions that I was going to ask you, which is if you had one piece of advice for students who are looking to go into maritime studies, could be our student who's asked us this question. What would that advice be? Like, what would you be advising students who want to be successful engineers or otherwise in the maritime industry?
Oh, look, I think it's really just trying to find something that you're passionate about. I mean, you can learn the same thing a million ways, but just working out what works for you. Some people are visual learners, some people are book learners. I think what AMC thrives in doing is really pushing or really being able to enable the practical side of things and being able to sort of link what you're learning in the classroom to going out on a boat and going, is this really practicable? Or is this realistic? I think that really helped me, being able to have access to sort of facilities so that you could actually test things and not just sort of sit behind the computer and go, oh, well, it failed, but why? You can't really sort of add it up. But I really think if you can sort of work out what engages you or how you are best engaged, and then sort of really run with that. There's always a way to do it, and I think, AMC will definitely help enable a lot of that. I mean, you can do sort of accentuating certain elements of each course down here, and I think that really helps you.
Fantastic. We did have a couple more questions just come in. I saw yours, Stefan. There's another one that's just popped up. We'll come back to those after I've finished speaking with Curtis, guys. And it looks like you've got a couple more questions coming up as well, Isaac. Just before I kind of switch focus over to Curtis, I want to hear a little bit about some of the more exciting things that you've done as an AUV engineer. So could you share with the audience, from your perspective, what was the most exciting thing that you've done in your role up to now?
Tricky one. I mean, my role started off pretty quickly to a certain extent. Within just what was it? Within the first 8 months of taking on my position, I was on a ship on my way to Antarctica for a 7-week cruise to do some testing with a PhD student.
Oh wow!
But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think the last 2 years we've gone down with our underwater vehicle and operated it successfully under 2 glaciers. And I think that really, like that's a bit of a sort of an end game for sort of our team.
For sure.
Is you're ultimately sort of boiling down what the whole year builds up to this one project down there where everything you do is really tested.
For sure.
You're doing maintenance on these vehicles, you're doing developments, you're doing repairs, and then you're sending it under an ice shelf. And if you've stuffed up or if you haven't done it right, it doesn't come back. Being successful for those 2 years in a row, like that's seriously, that's definitely the highlight.
Going for a cruise down in Antarctica, I was going to say, it doesn't sound like my first choice for a cruise. I also had an image of you controlling the UAV with kind of like a remote control car from the bow of the ship, but I imagine that's probably not how it works.
No, so for instance, the last one of the big missions we did over the early this year was a 60 odd kilometre round mission, so 30 kilometre line in a straight line away from the ship under the ice.
Sure.
And for about 7 or 8 hours, we had no communications with it. We were just quite literally sitting there monitoring everything that we had to monitor, but getting no replies on anything. So we expected to hear, and we heard nothing for 8 hours.
And how much do one of these units cost?
We it's about $5 million
Bit nervous.
we're running at the moment.
Little bit
No,
nervy.
no pressure at all.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you're still here to for me to interview.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
it's when you start sort of adding up all the elements that go into all these campaigns,
Mm,
it's it's high pressure but high reward. It's awesome.
awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing, Isaac. I'm
No
going to
problem.
switch focus over to Curtis now. But for all of you guys who had questions for Isaac, I can see we've already got 4. Just type them in. I'll come back and we'll have a chat to Isaac and revisit some of these topics with him in just a moment. Thanks so much, Isaac.
Perfect, not a problem.
Alrighty, Curtis. How you going today, Curtis?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good. Fantastic. So Curtis is one of our ocean engineering students. Curtis, could you just tell us a little bit about where you're from and what year you're in your degree?
Yeah, so I'm third year ocean engineer out of 4. I've got my honours to do next year. I'm from a little old town called Adelaide. I moved here in 2018, finished high school in year 12 in 2017 and pretty much jumped ship straight away and moved down here by myself.
There you go. So we'll get into, I'll kind of get into how you moved down to Tassie because, again, we often have a lot of students around the country wondering what's it like to move down to Tassie. I haven't been there before. Is it really cold? We'll get into that in just a second. But I just want to kind of go back to the start again like we did with Isaac and just talk a little bit about how you got into ocean engineering in the first place. Help us connect those dots.
Yeah, so I was always going to do engineering of some sort. Dad's an engineer. I'm actually third generation engineer. So it runs in the genes.
Good on you.
But I always just wanted to do something a bit different. I was going to go down the civil and structural engineering stream and then get into structural demolition, which is where, you see the bridges going and the whole thing collapses.
Still sounds pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Fun anyway.
And because of that, I was eventually going to have to move to most likely China or the US. So moving was always part of the question. So just where to go. But I came to AMC in year 12 on a school trip that was organised between a whole bunch of different schools in South Australia. So there was a dozen of us came down and got to spend 3 days down here learning about the different facilities and the different courses that AMC offer. And absolutely loved it. So worked as hard as I could through year 12, ended up getting a scholarship and then moved down the year later.
Awesome. Just real quick, what was the scholarship that you got with us?
It was one of the achievement award ones. It was for, there's 2 brackets. There's for achieving an ATAR above 90 and then achieving an ATAR above 96. And I achieved an ATAR above 90. So I got, I think it was $8,500 to spend on accommodation down here. Oh,
nice. No, very nice. Look, I always ask this because for all prospective students, parents, whoever might be in the audience, this is something that I hit on a lot in my role. Please apply for scholarships. There's an enormous number available. And the AMC in particular has some very generous scholarship programs. So I just want to talk a little bit about the move down to Tasmania. So you kind of knew you wanted to be into engineering. You wanted to do something a little bit different that was a little bit closer to home. And then you came to the AMC and then you actually made the decision to come to the AMC. Can you tell us a little bit for those who might be looking to move interstate, for example, how was that transition to Tasmania? And look, I'm a native Tasmanian. I won't mind too much if you're brutally honest with us.
It was a bit daunting, I think, being 17 years old at the time and being told that you're going to move, 1,000 kilometers away from home all by yourself. So there were reasons to stay and reasons to go. But the main one for me was that the first year, regardless of how well I did, was transferable. So I could always go home if I wanted to. But I absolutely loved it. I remember getting on the Spirit of Tasmania and it was getting on the port at Melbourne. And as soon as I got on the boat, something just sort of clicked in my mind. I'm like, yep, we're doing this. Let's get on with it. And haven't looked back for 3 years, haven't got homesick at all. But Yeah, moved here, stayed in student accommodation, like shared accommodation for probably the first semester, just over, which I'd absolutely recommend. It makes it so much easier, just having, a bunch of other students around that are your age doing the same thing, same
For
stage
sure.
in life. Give you some friends to start off your journey with. And then,
Does help.
finally moved into the studio apartment where I am now. So living life happily by myself.
And you're still there, Curtis.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. How, if you had any tips for a student who might be moving to a new university, a new state, was there anything that you found really helped you transition to a university life?
Yeah, it's going to be the most generic answer. Get involved.
Nice.
I tried.
Good advice.
We had our society day at the start of O week, and so I went and had a look around to see if there's anything I was interested in. So
Sure.
Came across the UTAS Car and Motorcycle Society. Been a bit of a motorhead. We get to travel around Tasmania and stay at different real scenic locations, which I absolutely love. And then we've got Seafarers Bar at the uni as well. Like, whether you drink or not, it's basically where everybody that stays on campus will meet up. That's where we do big uni events as well. So you've always run into people there and creating good friendships.
Awesome. So I want to switch the focus a little bit from your transition to uni to what you want to do and what you think about the field that you're studying. So maybe you can start off just by kind of telling us, we might have some prospective students in the field who are wondering, what you find really interesting about ocean engineering. Talk a little bit about what you like about the course that you're studying, I suppose.
Yeah, cool. I came down with the full intent that I was going to be an oil rig and subsea pipeline engineer. There's something about a 30-story building floating out in the middle of the ocean that just mind boggles me. It still does, and I understand them now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many pathways you can go with ocean engineering. You can end up doing AUVs like Isaac. I'm aiming for petroleum and gas industry. You can go into the renewables. There's a huge sector, especially with all the research opportunities that AMC have as well, which I would say 75% of ocean engineers that are in my cohort are interested in getting into the renewables sector. So there's heaps of opportunities in different areas. Plus, you can always work as a naval architect as well. The three areas of the three specializations you mentioned before, regardless of which one you study, you can work as all three. So it just widens the scope even more.
Sure. And what do you like? Do you have your sights on a particular job in that area, or are you kind of still tossing up between I'd like to build ships, but on the other hand, I'd really like to be building oil rigs?
Oh, oil rigs, 100%.
Okay.
I'm at that stage of life where I would like to be on rig. So, the fly in, fly out sort of work. For some reason, I have a attraction towards doing that. I reckon it'd be good fun. But because I haven't spent very little time in industry, it is hard to pinpoint a direct job that I would want.
For sure. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that experience, the necessary experience, obviously, you need to get these jobs. We were talking before about how tricky your placement has been because of the pandemic. Obviously, if you guys haven't heard, there's a bug going around at the moment. Can you talk a little bit about what your placement would usually be like, and what's happened this year with your industry placement?
Yeah, so Engineers Australia, which is a governing body that runs different parts of our course to make sure it meets Australian standards and such. They require us to do 12 weeks of work placement, 6 of those being in an engineering field. So I've got an internship that I'm starting in a month in Melbourne. Initially, the implication was that it was all done in person. You go and work in an engineering environment. That's had to change this year. So I'll be working both from here and from home in Adelaide. I'll be working via distance in both Melbourne and Hong Kong.
Yeah, wow. That's pretty cool. How long is that going to go for?
So I'll be doing full 12 weeks with them.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess that'll give you a much better idea of what you want to do once you graduate. Are you fully hoping that once you graduate that you can take this job with you around the world? Like, have you kind of got itchy feet?
Honest answer.
This isn't a leading question.
No, you're right. Honest answer, I want to move to Perth. I'd be happy to just settle down there. But it's who you know, it's not what you know. The connections that you make through different events at AMC. I've been in chats with people in France, Denmark, and Libya as well, being that they're all heavily involved in the maritime aspects of what I'm interested in. There's jobs everywhere, and you can end up all over the world with this degree.
Fantastic. We've got a bunch of questions, so I just want to finish up our quick chat, Curtis, by asking. You talked a little bit about getting involved, but is there one other bit of advice that you would give to any future students, or is there, if there was one thing that you could do over again as a student, what would it be? Whatever framing works best for you.
Being that I'm a straight out of high school student, I'll direct it towards them. I wouldn't stress so much about grades. It's one thing, like, to get into year 12 and get your head down, just get on with it the full year, trying to achieve the highest ATAR, or I'm not sure what the other scales the other states use, but
That's it.
It didn't really help me at all. Besides getting the scholarship, which was my goal, it's changed nothing for me here, I don't think. Especially when you get to university, grades don't matter. The saying is P's get degrees. That's not saying that's what I aim for, but there's different ways to learn. You understand the content in different ways. Some of my best units, or my favorite units, I haven't had the best grades in, but I've understood the most. I've engaged the most with it. I've still worked as hard as I can. So grades at the end of the day are nothing to get you down if you're not doing as well as you might want to be doing.
So kind of keep your eyes on the prize. Don't let those kinds of things discourage you. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, obviously there are some degrees that where you do need competitive grades to get certain jobs. But I think in a close-knit industry like this, what you're saying is that the networks are just as important, if not more important.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much, Curtis. Really appreciate that. I'm going to flip it over to our chat. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the questions one by one. I haven't filtered any of these, so I'm going to read them out and direct them to the person that they're directed to in the first place. So I'm going to ask Stefan's question first. This one's directed at you, Isaac. Given that you mentioned the variety of skills and expertise you've developed, would you say that your engineering specialty would suit someone who is interested in engineering but is struggling to settle on which one to do? So if they're kind of, I think what the question's kind of getting at is if they're like, well, I'm really interested in civil, I'm interested in electrical, but I don't know which one. Should I do a degree in ocean engineering?
Yeah. Well, like, I guess it's so hard to say. I mean, it's yeah. The way I've always looked at ocean engineering or any of the maritime engineering fields is you sort of get quite a good baseline understanding of engineering, and then you add all the complexities of maritime, of working or building in the maritime environment on top of that. So I sort of, you might not get into as much depth as you would about maybe road design or foundations or something like that if you were to do civil. But I feel like I've got a strong enough baseline plus all the other maritime knowledge that I can always go across to that. That's my perspective on it. I think having a very broad scope of subject matter cover is highly useful. But each to their own, really.
I think I think it's a good question, and if I could kind of translate your answer in a different way, that might be helpful. I think that there's what Isaac's kind of getting at is that the interconnected nature of the industry that Isaac's working in is quite different from graduating from an electrical engineering degree in somewhere like New South Wales and working for a firm where you have to specialize quite highly. Would you say, Isaac, that the nature of the industry lends itself towards getting kind of that broader perspective?
Yeah, I think so.
Kinda.
You end up, because everything is quite all encompassing when you start talking about these maritime based structures or infrastructure or machines. It is very valuable to have maybe a slightly more broader understanding.
Sure.
The environment affects so much of what you do. But that being said, though, I still also have a lot of friends and colleagues that have gone and worked in a larger maritime engineering firm, and all they do is design flange connections sort of thing for oil and gas pipelines. So I think it also comes down to the nature of your employer as to whether or not it's a larger place or a smaller place. I mean, part of the reason I need to have quite a broad scope of knowledge is because there's three of us that run this asset, as opposed to an engineering floor of 120 people that are designing one subsea installation.
Sure.
But yeah, as I sort of alluded to in the start, I think what the engineering degree really gives you is just the building blocks to start learning. It doesn't teach you everything. It sort of gives you a bit of a baseline, and then you sort of really kick off specialising after you graduate, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Thanks, Isaac. No, I think that can be a bit of a tricky question because it's you kind of have to see what happens once you graduate from your degree. Thanks for that, Stefan. This is a follow-up question from the one that I interrupted you with before, Isaac. Follow-up question. Thanks for answering my previous question. With your AUV background, would you be able to work in defense industry related to a TAC class SSG program? I don't have a translation on my end, unfortunately.
No idea, sorry.
Sorry for that.
There's a lot of crossover between AUVs and submarines, but there's also a lot of crossover.
Can I jump in on that one?
Yeah, go for it, Curtis.
You could, as an ocean engineer, but you would be more looking for your naval architecture degree. Well, that's architecture. They're still an engineer. I've spoken to a few engineers at Raytheon in Adelaide and ASC, and both of them would prefer me to have studied naval architecture as opposed to ocean engineering.
Awesome.
But yeah, you could absolutely get into that.
Thanks, Curtis. And I think that kind of goes into what we were talking about, how you can do the maritime engineering degree, but still have a bit of flexibility in moving sideways in the industry. Now, we've got a question here that we may need to take offline, but if anyone has, if Curtis or Isaac, you have any input. Is there scope for an active seafarer, a watchkeeper deck, to change his career direction towards something like an engineering stream or AUV? I'm particularly asking this question as I don't want to start from scratch again. I would really like to answer that question offline, just to kind of, because I think that the requirements for engineering might involve a couple of foundation units. But Curtis, you unmuted your mic there.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say about that one.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Apologies, I don't have the course requirements in front of me, but we do have a recording of all these questions. If you could just, yeah, we'll get back to you after this. I think that all registrants had to put their email addresses in, so if you could just let us know what your email is, we will absolutely get back to you and have a chat about that. So the next question, what are the most exotic trips you've heard seafaring students have gone on? I have a little anecdote about this. I did an expo with one of our nautical science alumni, and he went on a trip. It was literally around the world. As part of the nautical science degree, you do need to do a placement on a ship. So you literally go all around the world as part of the degree. And he said that he was speaking with it's a young student rubbing shoulders with people from Russia, people from South America. Again, going back to that really, really international vibe, I suppose. Curtis or Isaac, do you have any anecdotes from your experience as students about exotic trips that students have done?
One of my mates going through uni, his brother was doing his second mate ticket.
Mm-hmm.
So another seafaring ticket, but he spent a 4 month block in the North Sea, where he barely ever saw the horizon. It was either the sea or the sky. It was never the horizon.
Wow. Thanks, Isaac. Thanks for the question there. Curtis, did you have anything, or we'll move on to the next one?
The only thing I would say, probably not as exotic, but as engineers, we get to spend a week on the bluefin.
Oh, cool.
So that's something that if you're not interested in full-on exotic trips, you do get to spend a week, hop around a few little islands around Tasmania.
Thanks, Curtis. Bluefin, by the way, is the AMC research vessel, dedicated research vessel that we have here. Hey, Charles didn't realize you were here today. Charles has asked Curtis, how much did your trip to AMC cost from the school in SA?
It
if
was,
you can remember?
Yeah, it was all expenses paid. So it was done through Lefevre High School in South Australia. But yeah, all expenses paid for that one.
And Charles, just as an FYI, we had grand plans this year to bring students down to the AMC before COVID hit, unfortunately. But definitely hitting on a really good point there. We want to get students down to AMC, and yeah, we'll be out to you guys as soon as we've got a little bit more info. Charles, the mind boggles me too, Curtis. 30-story building in the middle of the ocean would be so unique. Is the petroleum industry off the top shelf of WA also interested in ocean engineers? Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a few friends that that are here now that did the 2+2 program, meaning they've studied in either New Zealand, Adelaide, or Perth for the first 2 years of this degree. The guys from Perth are all being poached by Woodside for their ocean engineering, for exactly that, the oil rigs up on the shelf.
Thanks, Curtis. And next question is, we'll be hearing more about the careers from global logistics and maritime management. Unfortunately, not in the remit or purview of this webinar. This webinar was more focused on submarines and talking about the maritime careers more broadly. However, we'd really love to put you in touch with one of our students or alumni who did global logistics and maritime management. Again, we'd love to reach out to you. If we can get your email, we'll put you in touch with someone. Next question, Curtis, who would organise the placement for your cohort? So how does the placement process work?
We're encouraged to do it ourselves. So we're all very aware that we have to do a placement from the get-go in the first year. Most companies won't take you on until the end of third year, because that's when you know everything. So yeah, we're encouraged to do it ourselves. Our unit coordinators will often send us links to people that are looking for applicants. A lot of companies will contact AMC directly asking for a specific group of students. For instance, I got one this morning. There was a company in Hobart that was asking for ocean engineers. So being as well known as AMC is throughout the maritime industry, there's probably, from what I've seen and what I've been given through email, there's more job offers and internship offers than there actually are students.
I want to back this as a shameless plug for the AMC. I can't help it. I work in marketing, but we have an extraordinary employment rate for our graduates. The Cohort program, which is kind of a high achieving program, students get an A type 85 or over, I believe, has a 100% employment rate I think for 6 years in a row or something. So yeah, no, just going back to being that kind of niche, institution for a niche industry. There's a lot of demand. Charles, just letting you know, Curtis, that all states and territories use ATAR, so just take note of that one. Thanks, mate. And Carolyn's asking if we have another information session on postgrad study. We don't currently, Carolyn, but that's good information. This is good feedback. I'll have a chat to Alicia about that and see if we can get one going for you guys, and we'll come back out to you if we do that. Thank you. Anonymous, is the HSC the only pathway into the AMC? Is TAFE a viable pathway with certificates? Yes, it is, in short. I think the minimum requirement sits at a certificate 4 or higher. The only thing to keep in mind if you are coming through TAFE is that you should definitely be looking to do something with an engineering or mathematics background. And you also need to have a lot of the degrees. I think ocean engineering is the same, Curtis, you can let me know, has a mathematics requirement and potentially a physics requirement off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's a mathematics requirement and a science-based requirement, but you've got the bridging courses for that as well as another option. That's
right. So I was just going to finish that up by pointing that out. If you do TAFE and you're looking to apply with us, then, and you haven't quite got your maths covered, we'll send you a conditional offer. You just enroll in a foundation unit with us over January. And then as long as you complete that, you can start with us the next semester. Vipin, apologies to miss out on the above question. Seafarer question is for Isaac. I think we answered that one. Thank you, Vipin. That is the Defence Submarine Building Program. Yes, it was. Question from Emma. If I don't get the ATAR score to get into the course directly, how would you recommend that I get into the course? So what will happen is if you don't have the ATAR to get directly into the course, Emma, we will send you what's called an alternative offer. And this will basically be for a 1-year pathway course through what we call the Diploma of University Studies. So basically you do 2 semesters with us. As long as you pass your units, I don't think that there's a GPA requirement for it, then you can enter into the degree the following year. So that's if you wanted to do either global logistics or maritime engineering with us. So my advice, make the application anyway. If you don't quite get the ATAR that you were hoping for, we'll send you an alternative offer anyway. Hope that answers your question, Emma. How can we be advised of future webinars in regards to AMC, University of Tasmania degrees? If you want to go onto our mailing list, we need to first of all have your email. The best way to do it is actually just to express interest in a course with us, and you kind of go on to, I suppose you would call it our marketing system, and you start getting more advice. The best thing to do if you want to be notified of events is simply to register for one of these and make sure that we've got your email. And as long as we've got somewhere that you have expressed interest in the AMC with us in the past, you will get future invites like this. What road bumps might be run into going into maritime seafaring with colour blindness? Curtis or Isaac, I'm not sure if you have any unique insights into this.
Yes and no. I know that you can go on the Navy's website, Australian Navy. They'll have information about that because I've got friends that have gone into the Navy under seafaring with colour blindness. But from personal experience, can't help you there.
Sure.
I have a feeling for any commercial captain's ticket, there might be some restrictions there. It may have to do with nighttime operations or something like that. But look, you'll have to, the AMSA website should actually be able to give you good guidance on that one.
What was that website? Sorry, Isaac.
The Australian Maritime Safety Authority. So,
Maritime.
I do recall having to do a colourblindness test for my tickets.
Okay. So it sounds like just checking with AMSA before proceeding might be the best advice here. But certainly does sound like it's not going to preclude you. Is that fair, guys? Right.
I'd look into it.
Sure.
There might be restrictions placed on it, but I'm not entirely sure.
Sure. We've actually just got we've also got a comment from Vipin, who's has a little bit more insight than us. You can't serve in a seafarer capacity if you have colour blindness, and this is to do with the navigation lights operating during nighttime. So that's a slightly clearer answer. I would still encourage jumping onto the AMCIL website to find out for yourself, because that's the best way to do it. And just another comment on the pathways to get into the maritime engineering degrees. We also have pathways in place with TAFE in South Australia and South Metro TAFE in WA. So if you are in South Australia or WA, have a look, inquire with those TAFEs about pathways into maritime engineering with the AMC. Thanks, Vipin. Thanks, Isaac. Thanks, Curtis. Got a couple more here. Got a question from Stefan. Do you have to select one engineering specialty, or can you undertake a general naval maritime engineering degree so that you're not pigeonholed to begin with? Curtis, you might have a slightly better idea of this, but my understanding is that you do have to pick a specialty from the outset. Or is there a common year? You do? Yeah.
You pick one from day one. That's just so they can enroll you and keep your enrollment.
Sure.
Across the first 2 of 4 years for all 3 specializations, it's general engineering. That also means you can defer to other universities and do generic engineering courses that are non-maritime related, and that everything still counts. When you get into 3rd year, that's when you specialize. So then you can change and swap and decide which one you want to choose then. But as I said earlier, it's not going to, the one you choose won't hinder you from any job opportunities in the future. They're all pretty interchangeable.
Awesome. Thanks, Curtis. A little bit of feedback again. It would be great to have an online session about on-campus student housing with AMC students sharing experiences. Thank you for the feedback. I think that we probably will do an accommodation webinar, probably sometime in January, I would tentatively suggest. Obviously with coronavirus, we try and be a little bit sensitive about these types of topics, but thank you for the feedback. I think it's an excellent suggestion. Question here about what the maritime business courses at the AMC are like and where do they lead? Good question. So the Bachelor of Global Logistics and Maritime Management is very, very similar to our regular business degree in that you kind of have, you're able to look in a couple of different areas that are specific to business domain. So things like marketing, you're able to look at HR, that all comes under the same bachelor degree. Except it's kind of got a maritime twist is kind of the best way to think about it. So for example, one thing that'll be a very heavy focus as you kind of get into the last years of your degree is looking at supply chain management, because this is such a crucial thing to be across when you're working in shipping. So you'll tend to work mostly with ports and industry, but there's a huge swath of jobs, as you can imagine, in that area. So it could be anywhere from HR to actually coordinating ships coming into harbour, for example. These are all areas that you could go to. So it's quite a flexible degree, like you would expect with a business degree, but definitely has a maritime bent. And again, these graduates are in similar demand. Probably not the same demand as engineering graduates, but again, unique degree, unique industry. Hope that answered your question. All right, I'll just give it a couple more seconds. Question from Vipin. Has there been any changes in the intake process of the AMC due to the COVID-19 pandemic? In terms of the application process, nothing has changed. You still make applications directly from the UTAS website for the AMC. The biggest change for us is obviously making the courses available online. So what I can say is while all of Tasmania is breathlessly waiting to hear from government about what we're going to be doing with the borders, unfortunately, we just can't know that until we know. We're expecting to get an update on that later in October, but what I can tell you is that the entire university, for at least semester 1 2021, is prepared to issue these degrees online. So even if you're not able to come down to Tassie for semester 1, you can still study from where you are. And you heard from Curtis just before that even doing his industry placement, that wasn't hampered by COVID. He was still able to do it while isolated down in Tassie. So the short answer is no, but there will obviously be wrinkles based on what happens with the situation in the coming months. I hope that answers your question, Vipin. All right, you just wait a few more seconds if we get a couple more questions coming in. I hope that we've been useful for everyone. Hope we've managed to answer your questions. If we haven't, please ensure you let us know what your email was, or when we send you the recording, just get back to us with your question, because we really want to make sure that you are getting what you came here for. Alrighty, it looks like we don't have any more questions coming through for the time being. I spoke too soon. Oh no, I didn't. It's Charles saying thanks, Isaac, and thanks, Curtis. I couldn't say it any better myself. We don't have any more questions. Thanks so much, Curtis, for coming along. Isaac, thanks for coming down from Beauty Point to contribute your expertise. It's been really interesting, even for myself, just hearing from you guys. So really appreciate it. Thank you from Carolyn to you guys as well. And for everyone who wants to get in touch, we have our details up on the screen there. Please let us know if there's anything else that we can answer for you. And for those whose questions we can answer, we'll be in touch with you shortly. But thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe. Thanks, Vipin. I'll just stop recording now.